Christopher Brian Hill is an urban explorer with a YouTube channel called Urbex Hill. Over the past 10 years, he's been uploading raw footage of his visits to some of the creepiest abandoned...
Ich glaube, das können wir tatsächlich geben. Das ist der Typ, der vom Stuhl gerissen wird, oder?
Oh ja, kann sein. Ich erinnere mich auch an... Das sah, glaube ich, auch so aus.
Ja. Nee, ist es aber, glaube ich, nicht.
buildings in the country, often running into unexpected and sometimes life-threatening situations. Urban explorers like Chris face many dangers, from aggressive stray dogs to hostile squatters to respiratory risks and unsound structures. Venturing into an unfamiliar abandoned building is much more risky than it might sound. It's obviously much safer to explore abandoned buildings in the light of day and with a group of friends, but in most of his videos, Chris explores at night and always alone. In June 2022, he visited the abandoned Westinghouse.
Leute, die alleine nachts in Lost Places gehen. Hardcore gefährlich, aber auch faszinierend, dass man sich das traut.
Electric factory located in Cleveland, Ohio. Built more than a century ago, the factory originally consisted of 7 different buildings, but most of them have been demolished by now. Even though the Westinghouse Company was established in 1886, it didn't reach Cleveland until 1894. Founded by Thomas Edison, Westinghouse is best known for the notable engineers who worked for the company, including Nikola Tesla and William Stanley. For several decades, the Westinghouse Company rivaled General Electric, and it was last used as a lighting equipment production plant before its...
Nikola Tesla, Fun Fact, Entschuldigung, dass ich stoppe. Nikola Tesla, unfassbar interessanter Typ. Der hat einfach Ideen, die tatsächlich vielleicht möglich waren, dass Elektrizität gratis ist und man sie einfach aus der Luft kriegen kann. Dass man sie über Luft überträgt und das wäre theoretisch vielleicht möglich gewesen. Und Nikola Tesla war sich auch zu Lebzeiten absolut sicher, dass er Nachrichten von Außerirdischen empfangen hat. Der Boy ist sick. Also Nikola Tesla hat wirklich eine unfassbar interessante Lore.
Abandonment in 1979. For the past 4.5 decades, the abandoned factory has been one of the hottest urban exploration locations for curious explorers and YouTubers. In 2012, the factory started receiving even more attention after the Black Widow interrogation scene from the first movie of the Avengers was shot there. 10 years later, Chris made the trip to the abandoned factory and recorded everything he saw. As Chris begins exploring, there doesn't seem to be anyone around, and only the sound of crickets can be heard in the darkness as he walks around the outside of the building. Disturbingly, the sound of gunshots can be heard in the distance less than 5 minutes into the recording. It's worth mentioning that for the past few years, Cleveland has been ranked as one of the top 10 most dangerous cities in the US, making this visit to the abandoned factory even more risky.
Hey, du lebst an einem Ort, wo Schießereien normal sind, Sophie.
That's Cleveland. Wow. That's easy. It's not even that far away from here.
Stell dir mal vor, du bist an einem Ort, wo einfach rumgeschossen wird.
Like a shootout.
Chris has experience exploring everything from abandoned mental hospitals and sanatoriums to vacant occult temples, and he shrugs off the fear as he enters the creepy building. Just like in many abandoned buildings, Chris finds a mattress on the floor, meaning at least one person has been sleeping there recently. As he captures footage of the first floor and walks up the stairs to the second floor, all that can be heard in the eerie darkness is the sound of his footsteps. A few minutes later, Chris goes down to the basement, and the footage becomes increasingly creepier as Chris runs into a series of dead ends under the leaky, moldy ceiling.
Okay, I'm hearing something.
Ganz ehrlich, lieber da in diesem Haus sein, mit einem Geist oder so, als draußen bei dem Shootout.
There's animals down here.
At several points during his exploration of the basement, he can be heard making comments about a strange noise coming from somewhere on that floor, and at first he seems to think it's an animal. Alarmingly, he finds a few shell casings on the ground from what was probably a 9mm handgun. Although it would be pretty unsettling to find something like this lying on the ground in an abandoned factory basement, it's worth mentioning that police departments often use abandoned buildings and complexes for training exercises. However, in this case, it's impossible to know if that's really what happened. Shortly after, he comes across a series of disturbing messages on the walls. He continues recording as he walks down narrow corridors, and this is where...
Sowas kann jeder theoretisch machen, in so ein Lost Place gehen, einfach so eine gruselige Nachricht an die Wände machen. Aber das ist halt echt fucking gruselig, solche Nachrichten zu lesen, oder? Wenn du da durchläufst.
things get a lot more disturbing.
This place is so wet.
Oh, da sitzt jemand.
God in me. Yo. You need some help, bro? Yo.
Ich würde halt schnell gehen. Ich meine, ihr habt gesehen, vorhin wurde das Profilbild von diesem Typen, dem YouTuber gezeigt, und der ist halt ripped, ne? Der ist halt muskulös und groß. Aber trotzdem, wenn ich den sehe, würde ich halt schnell gehen. Ich würde vor allem nicht filmen und hochladen.
That's crazy.
Also du hast jemanden gefunden, der vielleicht drogenabhängig ist, obdachlos, was weiß ich. Ich würde den da jetzt nicht filmen und das hochladen. Bin irgendwie ein bisschen respektlos gegenüber dem, der da drin ist. Stell dir vor, du hast halt kein Haus oder so und lebst dann da drin oder bist halt abhängig. Und dann merkst du, jemand ist bei dir reingekommen, du hast halt nichts, wo du dich verstecken kannst, kauerst dich da zusammen, der Typ filmt dich.
After about 20 minutes of exploring, the visit takes a very dark turn as Chris runs into a hunched over man without a light at the far end of the room. He calls out to him and asks if he needs any help, but the man doesn't move or respond, and Chris decides to leave him alone. Understandably, Chris's breathing can be heard getting louder and heavier after the extremely unsettling encounter, but things were only about to get more disturbing for him.
You know what? I'm gonna help that dude out. I'm gonna get this dude a $20 bill.
Ich glaube, der Typ will gerade keine Hilfe.
Hey, I got some money for you. He's not there.
Ich finde das nicht gut.
About 4 minutes later, Chris decides to go back to help the man out by giving him a $20 bill, but
Das auch zu filmen, ich finde das nicht gut, weißt du?
Ja.
Das wirkt so wie, hey, ich bin ein guter Mensch, geh jetzt mal hin und gib ihm 20 Euro, der Typ, ne? Vielleicht eher alleine lassen. Du hast die Matratze gesehen, vielleicht wohnt er dabei halt obdachlos. Ich finde das irgendwie nicht gut.
alarmingly, when he goes back to the room, the man is no longer there. This could be incredibly dangerous, as squatters are known to behave aggressively toward unwanted visitors. And because they know the place better than anyone else, they can easily hide in the shadows and attack or scare visitors when they least expect it. One theory that many viewers seemed to favor was that maybe the man was not a homeless person at all, but a gang member who was hiding from the shootout that could be heard at the beginning of the video. However, it's impossible to confirm if this was actually the case, and it seems
Stell dir vor, du bist ein Gang-Member, der sich versteckt von der Schießerei draußen und ein Typ kommt zu dir und gibt dir 20 Euro. Du bist einfach so ein Typ, der sich da versteckt, weil er nicht abgeknallt werden will. So ein Typ kommt zu dir, hier, 20er.
pretty unlikely given his strange behavior. As he continues searching for the man, Chris notices bats flying around the basement, and things get even more eerie at this point.
Ja, wenn du siehst, dass da jemand drinnen wohnt, gerade vielleicht wohnt, geh doch raus. Oh, ist das voll cool mit den Schmetterlingen, wollte ich gerade sagen, mit den Fledermäusen.
Right when he walks into one of the rooms, if you look closely at the far left of the screen, you can actually see the man from earlier standing in what used to be a door frame, staring at Chris in the
Oh, das
darkness.
ist gruselig.
Alarmingly, Chris doesn't notice and continues walking. It's impossible to know how long the man had been following him, and in these kind of situations, it can be hard to gauge the squad.
Ich glaube, der Man hat ihm nicht gefolgt. Ich glaube, der Man will da drin seine Ruhe haben und Chris nervt ihn einfach ein bisschen.
Squatter's intentions. A few minutes later, the squatter can be seen walking outside as cars pass by the side of the building. At one point, Chris mentions he thinks the guy said hello, but it can't be heard clearly through the camera audio. Just when he decides to head out, he hears a cell phone vibrate, indicating that there are more people down there with him hiding in the darkness. Having had enough disturbing encounters for the night, he decides to play it safe, and fortunately, he was able to leave the building unharmed.
Ich habe irgendwie das Gefühl, dieses Video kann nicht echt sein. Also du bist in einer gefährlichen Gegend, du bist da in diesem Haus, du hörst, dass da mehrere drin sind, du bist so entspannt.
Mhm.
Es wirkt für mich alles irgendwie so, weiß ich nicht, so seltsam. Keine Ahnung, irgendwie finde ich das hardcore komisch, wie er reagiert auf das Ganze. Ich meine, ja, er ist, wie gesagt, er ist ein Pumper, aber ich glaube trotzdem, dass du in einer Gegend, wo die Leute halt alle bewaffnet sind und so, nicht so fucking entspannt bist und bist so, oh, da ist jemand, oh, ich geh nochmal hin und gebe ihm einen 20er. Sondern die normale Reaktion wäre, oh scheiße, da ist jemand, sorry, und schnell gehen.
He never found out who that man was, and since then he hasn't uploaded another video of the Westinghouse factory.
Das kann sein, Genie.
This video was recorded in Tartu, Estonia, and uploaded to YouTube in August of 2016. In it, a group of 4 teenagers visit an abandoned sauna that was built more than a century ago in 1915, back when Estonia was still part of the Russian Empire. After fulfilling its purpose for 80 years, the sauna was decommissioned in 1995. The building remained abandoned for 23 years until in 2018 it was fully renovated and turned into a beauty salon, which is still operating as of this video's upload in 2023. In August of 2016, the uploader visited the abandoned location with 3 friends. Upon entering the building, you can see that it looks exactly what you would expect a building that has been abandoned for 21 years.
Fledermäuse sind wie süße Vögel. Oder, Dovi?
Vögel sind auch süß.
Ja, aber nicht so süß wie Fledermaus. Hast du mal gesehen, wie die Fledermaus ist? Die war so...
Ja.
Das ist so... Ach, Fledermäuse sind so süß. Ich liebe Fledermäuse. Flughunde und so finde ich auch gruselig, weil die so riesig sind. Aber... Das ist jetzt auch... Entschuldigung, wir gucken gerade Horror, aber...
So, Mr. Batson and I have just come back from a rescue.
Guck ihn
Picked up Mr. Forrest.
an! Das ist ein Hund! Guck mal, wie viel der ist.
He's called him.
Das ist doch ein Hund mit Flügeln. Oh, guck mal. Oh, die Wangen, oh, die
I
Zunge.
think what's happened is that
Oh, ist das fucking süß.
for him to
Guck mal. Oh Gott. Oh, ist das gierig.
There's no injuries on him.
Ich finde, die Hände sehen so fucking eklig aus. Sorry, aber... Oh, guck dir das mal, der ist so... Ja, doch, ein bisschen würde ich noch nehmen. Der stinkt fast.
So he'll be in care for a little
Guck dir das an. Gott, ist das süß.
working well.
Guck dir das an. Sein Mund ist so voll. No, wir gucken noch einmal... Er soll noch einmal eine Banane essen.
Go home.
Guck dir das an.
His mum.
Er hat den Mund immer noch voll. Er ist immer voll. Das ist so... Oh, er will nicht. Er muss erst mal essen.
Wieso lässt sich nicht erstmal runterschlucken?
He's a big
Oh,
old
guck dir den an. Gott, ist das süß. Das ist ein Flughund. Ja, aber trotzdem, das ist für mich das Gleiche.
as well. Didn't take too
Warum schluckt er nicht runter?
even though he was low. They're an arboreal animal.
Gott, ist das süß, du? Ist das süßer als ein Vogel?
So
Das ist süß.
Oh, und guck dir mal diese riesigen Augen an.
net on him, he started to take off.
Stell dir vor, du hast das als Haustier und alles, was du immer willst, dass du ihm eine fucking Banane gibst.
A bit of a wrestle on the
Oh, will er wieder ein Stück? Oh, guck dir das an, die Augen. Oh. Kannst du noch einmal Banane essen, bitte? Ja, er isst gleich nochmal Banane.
little bit more nana.
Oh, guck dir! Dieser gierige kleine Schlingel. Oh, ich schmelze.
Go on.
Ja, guck ihn dir an. Oh, es tut mir sehr leid, Leute. Oh Gott, ist das süß.
To look like. There's an insane amount of mold growing freely on the walls, the heaters are covered in a thick layer of rust, the floor is full of holes, and the entire structure looks like it could collapse at any second. Throughout the video, the teenage explorers also run into some disturbing messages on the walls. An especially eerie one reads, "You can't hide," and there are also several creepy drawings of stick figures graffitied on the walls in some of the other rooms. For the first few minutes of the visit, other than the disturbing messages and some loose shoes and other personal belongings, there doesn't seem to be any indication that somebody could be living there or had even visited the location recently. However, about 20 minutes into the visit, one of the teenagers finds a door frame covered by a curtain, and they decide to explore the room.
Ich glaube halt tatsächlich, so Squatter, also so Leute, die da, so Obdachlose, die da leben oder so, sind hardcore gefährlich. Vor allem, weil die manchmal auch drauf sind und so. Deswegen, Leute, geht niemals, also eigentlich geht nie in Lost Places, weil es ist halt hart gefährlich. Oder? Ich muss noch mal kurz über den Flughund reden. Okay, stellt euch das mal vor. Das war ein wilder Flughund. Ne? Sie hat doch, glaube ich, gesagt, er war irgendwie verletzt oder so. Stellt euch vor, ihr seid ein wilder Flughund. So eine riesige Kreatur, so ein Mensch nimmt euch, packt euch in so eine Decke. Ihr würdet wahrscheinlich richtig Panik haben. Weißt du, so, was passiert hier? Und dann hält ihr euch einfach so eine Banane hin. Du bist so, ja, okay. Du bist so richtig Angst, bist du so. Wenn ich sterbe, ist jetzt okay. Ich nehme noch ein bisschen.
As one of the explorers shines a flashlight into the room, a gut-wrenching scream can be heard coming from the shadows. Immediately, the 4 teenagers run out of the building in a panic. When they finally step outside, the sun is already set, and the boys get into the car to flee from the location. Although the explorer was too busy running to show footage of the screaming man, it's more than likely that it was a homeless resident of the abandoned building who wasn't expecting
Der hat sich ja sogar eine
visitors.
Tür dahin gebaut.
Still,
quasi.
it must have been extremely disturbing to experience something like that, even if they went together as a group. After that day in 2016, the boys never went back to the abandoned sauna again.
Es ist fucking gruselig für die Jungs, die da reingegangen sind, aber man muss es sich halt auch vorstellen, aus der Perspektive von dem Typen, der da drinnen wohnt, weil er halt kein Haus hat oder so, ist das ja noch viel schlimmer, weißt du? Du willst einfach nur deine Ruhe, dir geht's scheiße, du hast ein hartes Leben und dann kommen da irgendwelche Leute mit Filmequipment rein und drehen da und kommen halt dann zu dir und na, was sollst du machen? Ist ja auch kacke. Ich wurde entführt. Oh, eine Banane. Gott, ich könnte jetzt mit euch noch eine Stunde über diesen Flughund reden.
In March of 2022, YouTubers Meg and Chris uploaded a new video to their channel, Back in Time MC, in which they showed footage of their visit to a rundown old farmhouse somewhere in the UK. In the caption, they mentioned that they found an entry point through an open window around the side of the house. Based on the state of disarray the farmhouse is in, it's clear that nobody has been maintaining it for quite some time. The floor is covered in leaves and cobwebs, the shoes look dusty and unused, and there are even a couple of dead animals lying on the floor, along with some shotgun shells lying on top of a bedside table. The only clues that indicate somebody could have been at the location relatively recently are that one of the light bulbs in one of the bedrooms looks relatively new, and some of the clothes in the closet look only gently used. Based on the pictures that Chris finds on different shelves and hung up on the walls, it appears as if a family of at least 4 children used to live in the farmhouse.
Krass, sich vorzustellen, dass da
As the
Leute einfach
couple
gelebt
continues with
haben
the exploration,
und
they
plötzlich
walk
das
into
Haus
one of the
verlassen
upstairs
haben.
bedrooms, where they find something very unexpected.
Thin, narrow piece of carpet that comes all the way across. Absolutely nuts. Maybe we'll come into this bedroom here. And wow. Oh my god! Hello! You're alive!
You are?
You know, man,
You live in here, you can't live in here. Yeah? You
No.
can't. What do you mean you can't? Live
we
in
thought it was
here.
abandoned. We thought it was abandoned.
You can't live in here.
When he first walked into the room, Chris didn't notice that there was someone asleep in the bed. It wasn't until Meg walked in and made a noise that the woman sleeping in the bed woke up and gave them the scare of their life. Although the uploaders blurred the woman's face out of respect for
Ah, diese Frau, ne? Ja, die haben sich ja, weißt du, wie entspannt war die Frau? Stell dir vor, du wachst auf, da stehen 2 Leute in deinem Schlafzimmer und du so, kann ich euch helfen? Kann ich euch einen Tee anbieten? Könnte fake sein, ist schon seltsam, ne? Aber seltsam, hardcore seltsam. Ich habe irgendwie das Gefühl, man sollte nicht in Lost Places gehen.
her privacy, it's clear that she's pretty old. During the conversation, she tells the
Stell dir vor, so eine Omi lebt so. Oh.
couple that she doesn't have any family that could take her to live somewhere else less depressing. Out of sheer kindness, Chris and Meg keep the lady company and try their best to understand her situation. She introduces herself as Jane, and over the next 10 minutes they ask her questions about how she ended up living all alone in an abandoned farmhouse. Thanks to the couple's empathy, the initial shock of being startled by the sleeping old lady and seeing her living in such terrible conditions quickly turns into a heartwarming moment in which the 3 of them talk about each other's lives.
What happened was, I came here to help somebody,
Okay.
and this is only for a week I'm coming.
Yeah.
And that was 1993.
Oh god.
Wow, so you've been here nearly 30 years.
Yeah.
Disturbingly, Jane mentioned she's been living in the abandoned farmhouse for 30 years, and even though Chris and Meg offer to help her, bring her food, and buy her clean clothes and sheets, she seems hesitant to accept anything from them, claiming that she's fine living the way she does. She mentions that even though it's not her house, the men who work at the farmhouse know she's there and they bring her food and water every day. In a touching moment at the end, the couple agrees with Jane to visit her again soon. This would have been a happy ending to the story, but Chris and Meg included a caption at the end of the video that cast the situation in a more disturbing light. The caption reads, "I did a lot of research to try and find the name of the farm and whom it was owned by. Luckily, I got the information needed, and I even got a message from someone who knew the farmer who farms there. Chris goes on to explain that the man who reached out to him also knew that Jane was living there, and that the farmer also lives in the farmhouse with her. According to the man, Jane is very well cared for, but she chooses to live in those terrible conditions anyway. The man also mentioned that Jane's husband is up there constantly to make sure she's okay, but she doesn't accept his help very easily, or anyone's help for that matter. It's worth mentioning that Jane might not have been completely truthful about her situation to Chris and Meg. During their conversation, she mentioned that she didn't have anyone to care for her except for the farmer, but the man who knew the farmer told Chris that she also has a brother who tries to take care of her. Not entirely convinced by what the man told him, Chris continued digging for information and found that the farm was not on any land registry records, but there was another property to Jane's name that she owned between 1986 and 2015. After visiting the other property, Chris mentioned that it was as unkempt and beat up as the farmhouse itself. Having heard two different versions of the story.
Oh, die Omi.
Mhm.
Das macht mich sad.
Jo.
Stell dir vor, so eine Omi lebt da.
Ja.
Oh. Ich hoffe Fake-Blogs, aber ich weiß es halt nicht. Oh.
From the man who contacted him and from Jane herself, he decided to contact Adult Social Services. This is the email he received from them. Good morning, thank you for your email. I can confirm that Adult Social Care are aware of this lady, however, I'm not able to provide you with any further details. We appreciate your input and the information you have provided, and thank you for raising your concerns with us. Chris then told the man who contacted him to tell Jane that he and Meg would be happy to go back and visit her if she wanted them to. After this, there were no further updates on the old woman, and we'll likely never know what became of her. The only thing we know for sure is that if someone else decides to explore the abandoned farmhouse in the future, they'll likely run into the same situation as Chris and Meg. Sadly, this type of situation is much more common than many people realize. With rising prices and the overall state of the global economy, a large part of the elderly population is being forgotten. Hopefully, Jane can accept some help from her family members and live out the rest of her days in much better and healthier conditions than the one she was in when the video was uploaded. Robert Fulton Elementary is an abandoned school in a pretty rough...
Vlogs schreibt, er hat eine Reaction gesehen, der hat das aufgedeckt, dass es fake ist. Ich hoffe halt, dass es fake ist, aber so ist nämlich sad, dass es was auch sonst gibt und Oh, jetzt bin ich sad. Ich habe Mitleid mit alten Leuten. Aber ich weiß, was hilft. Guck dir die Augen an.
Was ist der da?
Eine Weintraube.
Oh.
Oh, guck, wer ist so, darf ich?
Ist ja für klein.
Oh, ist so winzig. Das hat geholfen. Das hat geholfen.
Neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio. The building is 92 years old and has been abandoned for over 13 years. After several complaints from nearby residents who mentioned that the abandoned building was an eyesore, a potential crime hotspot, and that it was lowering the value of the properties, the mayor of Cleveland announced plans to turn the rundown old building into a high-quality, mixed-income housing unit for the community. Although the idea is still in the planning stages and the city needs more funding to complete the project, the plan is for the renovations to begin by the end of 2024. For now, Robert Fulton Elementary remains one of the creepiest abandoned schools in the country. In May of 2023, Chris Hill, again from the YouTube channel Urbex Hill, uploaded a video in which he made a second visit to the boarded-up, abandoned elementary school. The first video he made of the school was back in 2022. During his first visit, he heard strange humming, chanting, creaking, and banging noises coming from different rooms. This was part of the description in the first video. Most sections of the building are falling apart, and the water and elements have done irreversible damage to the structure. I would not recommend anyone explore this school. You risk getting robbed or worse. With that being said, I heard weird noises and other various things during my exploration.
Er besucht diese Schule, schreibt in seine Beschreibung, dass man da ausgeraubt wird und sterben kann und, ne? Dass man da niemals hingehen sollte. Und dann ein paar Wochen später ist er so, I'll fucking do it again. Warum, wenn du selber warnst, warum machst du es nochmal?
After these incidents, the vast majority of people would have been too terrified to even think of going back, but 2 years later, Chris decided to make a second visit to the school alone at 1 a.m.
The decay is crazy in here.
From the very beginning of the footage, it's clear that Robert Fulton Elementary belongs in a different category of abandoned buildings than most others. What stands out the most about the building is the fact that just over a decade ago, children were learning in those classrooms, running and playing in the halls, and now it looks more like something out of a horror movie than a school.
Ist das halt echt
The
hardcore
eeriness of the
runtergekommen.
location, the pitch darkness, and the extreme state of decay of the building all contribute to the school's incredibly creepy atmosphere, and not a lot of people would dare go in there at night, much less alone. For a building that has only been abandoned for 13 years, Robert Fulton Elementary is in a much worse state
Ich meine,
than
seit
other buildings that have been
13
vacant.
Jahren ist die geschlossen. Die war noch aktiv, als ich zur Schule ging. Vor 13 Jahren, 2010. 2010 war ich irgendwie, weiß ich nicht, in der 8., 9. Klasse. Als ich in der 8., 9. war diese Schule noch im Betrieb und ist in der kurzen Zeit so krass verschimmelt. Das ist sick.
For much longer, but Chris doesn't seem to mind as he captures footage of the dark corridors with peeling walls and random debris lying all over the floor. As he ventures deeper into the school, Chris starts hearing strange noises, but nobody seems to be around, and he continues his exploration in the chilling silence. The underlying structure in some of the rooms on the upper floors seems extremely unstable, but Chris shows his expertise in urban exploration by avoiding the surfaces that crack under his feet. After about 15 minutes of exploring the top floors, Chris goes down into the basement, which is arguably the most deteriorated part of the school. As he explores the dark rooms, he finds some indications that other people could be living there. Interestingly, he also finds what appears to be a boiler room that's been flooded with water.
Das sieht ja nicht aus wie Equipment, das man vor 13 Jahren benutzt hat.
At around the 30-minute mark, a loud banging noise can be heard coming from one of the rooms, and it becomes very clear that Chris is not alone. As he steps into one of the classrooms, he finds a very eerie message written on the chalkboard, which reads, "Don't explore alone," as well as a paper sign on the door that reads, "Keep out." Despite the clear warnings, he goes inside, only to find more signs that somebody's living there. This is where Chris's visit to Robert Fulton Elementary takes a very chilling turn.
Aber er hat einen schönen Multivitaminsaft, wer auch immer da lebt. Also irgendjemand lebt hier, aber er achtet darauf, dass er seine Vitamine kriegt. Mach das nicht, ich will es nicht sehen.
Fearing for his life after hearing the blood-curdling scream, he sprints out of the building to safety, hoping that the man wasn't following him. If you look closely at the footage, you can see the outline of the screaming man when Chris peels back the curtain to his room. Upon reviewing the footage later that night, he found something else even more unsettling. When he first walked into the building, his camera caught something that he didn't notice at the time. In the distance, a man's shadow can be seen walking into one of the rooms. It's not clear where the man went after that, but based on the strange noises Chris heard throughout his visit, it's very likely that the man was watching him all along. Although the scream was terrifying to hear, and we can only
Genau wie das erste Video, wo er den Typen da gesehen hat, der so am Boden hockte, wirkt das für mich fake. Er hört ein Geräusch, geht er in den Raum, an der Tafel steht "Don't explore alone", was er gerade macht. An der Tür steht ein relativ neu aussehendes Schild, wo "Keep out" drauf steht. Dann geht er rein und dann wartet jemand hinterm Vorhang und irgendwie, das wirkt für mich zu passend. Ich weiß, finde ich halt irgendwie komisch.
only imagine what Chris must have felt at that moment. It's worth mentioning that the room he entered was probably the man's home, and from the squatter's perspective, it was probably just as terrifying to see a random man pull back the curtain to his room. These kinds of encounters can often get violent very quickly, but thankfully Chris once again made it out safely. He hasn't uploaded new footage of the location since then. This footage was uploaded in October 2019 by YouTuber Baker X Derek.
Hat er dann ein Airhorn als Hufe? Erstmal da rumscrollen. Was wir jetzt bisher durch dieses Video gelernt haben, ist, dass in Amerika sehr viele Leute in verlassenen Gebäuden leben.
A tour guide from San Bernardino, California. One day, as he was riding his motorcycle on the highway in California, he noticed an abandoned house sitting on top of a hill and decided to take a look inside. From the very beginning of the footage, it becomes clear that somebody has already been there, and that it probably wasn't the original owners of the house. Unlike many abandoned buildings, you can tell this house used to be beautiful before it was vacated, but that doesn't make it any less creepy to visit, even in the middle of the day.
Das war aber ein schöner Ort.
Heebie-jeebies, dude.
EBGBs sind Gänsehaut, also.
Dude, that dark room. I kept feeling something was gonna jump out at me. What's down here? Dude, I think I hear somebody. I think I hear something.
Derek goes down to explore one of the rooms on the bottom floor, and this is where he hears a disturbing thud. Terrified, he makes a run for it and even trips and falls on his way out, but eventually he gets back on his motorcycle and flees the location. As per one of the most popular theories proposed by viewers, the noise was probably made by a homeless person who was trying to warn Derek to get out of his home. Although squatters don't spend all their time lurking in the shadows, it's common for them to use the darkness as a tool when someone comes into the building unannounced. It's a basic rule of urban exploration that if you hear a loud noise upon entering a room, you should probably leave. Sometimes squatters make a noise as a first and final warning to drive visitors away respectfully. If Derek had pushed forward, he may have been attacked by whoever was hiding in the darkness.
Jetzt sollte man auch am Anfang mal reingehen, fragen, hey, lebt hier jemand? Weißt du?
Mhm.
Sonst vielleicht sagen, ich komme rein. Wenn jemand lebt, sag Bescheid, dann gehe ich. Weißt du, vielleicht besser als einfach reingehen.
It's a natural impulse to call out and announce your presence in these kinds of situations, but squatters will very rarely answer these calls in a normal way. Nobody likes to be seen living in those conditions, and more often than not, the response will be rather aggressive and sometimes even violent. Fortunately, in this case, Derek was able to get away from the potentially dangerous situation just in time. In central Ontario, Canada, there's a small community south of Port Elgin known as North Bruce. To the locals, however, it's known as the Devil's Elbow. According to John, the urban explorer who uploaded this video, the reason for the name was that there was once an occult high priest who lived in the mansion at a cul-de-sac, in which the townspeople used to think there was paranormal activity due to the occult rituals the priest used to perform in his home. The mansion has since been abandoned, and as of today, nobody wants to buy it or live in it due to its chilling atmosphere and sketchy past. According to John, some renovations have been made sporadically since the house was vacated, but as of the video's upload, the house was still abandoned. In 2019, John set out to explore the occult mansion alone at night, but things didn't go exactly as he
Das ist schon noch ein
planned.
guter Flachbildfernseher.
In comparison to other abandoned buildings, the mansion seems to be in relatively good shape, except for the
Waschmaschine ist auch
garage,
noch
which
gut.
has clearly seen better days. About 5 minutes into the exploration, John starts to hear strange noises upstairs, but they seem to quiet down as soon as he climbs the set of stairs.
Okay, guys, I think I've been hearing stuff upstairs, but I'm hoping, and I mean this, I really hope that it's paranormal and not someone freaking in here. My keys are making noises. Freaking somebody down there, dude. Come on, quit messing with me. I'm just trying to freaking. I'll leave. There's somebody else in here. Now I've got myself in a bad situation. Oh, jeez.
Disturbingly, as he walks around upstairs, the noises can be heard again, even louder this time, leading John to think that perhaps someone else is in there messing with him. Although he mentions loudly to whoever is in there with him that his only intention is to explore and that he doesn't want to bother anyone, whoever was making the noise doesn't respond and continues hiding. The noises stop for a
Ja, man
couple
sollte vielleicht
minutes,
rausgehen
but
dann.
then something terrifying happens.
It's Florida. Oh my god, Freelander. Hello? Is there somebody here?
Das ist halt auch, weißt du, da lebt niemand. Und wenn ich ein Obdachloser bin, das ist ein Haus mit Strom und einer Waschmaschine.
Mhm.
Das ist doch perfekt.
I'm not here to bother or rob anything. I was just here exploring. I thought it was a band.
Disturbingly, a man's voice can be heard screaming, "I'm gonna kill you," and before catching a glimpse of who it is, John runs out of the mansion immediately and doesn't look back until he's a safe distance away from the building. It's unknown who was in the house or how long they had been watching him, or even if they had bad intentions or were just messing with him. According to several viewers, it's very unlikely that the other person in the house was another explorer. In the urban exploration community, people usually help each other out, and there's a sort of code that every explorer sticks to in order to help keep creepy locations as safe to visit as possible. If the other person in the house was another explorer, making noises in an abandoned house and screaming, "I'm going to kill you," would obviously be very out of the ordinary. That leaves the question of who could have screamed at John. It's more than likely that it was just a homeless person who didn't want any visitors, but because John ran out before he could see anyone, this much will probably remain unknown forever.
Ja, was wir gelernt haben, ist nicht machen. Nicht reingehen in die Häuser, weißt du?
Mhm.
Zu gefährlich. Vor allem in Amerika, da leben scheinbar viele. Aber war doch ein schönes Video, nicht wahr? War doch gruselig, war doch mal was anderes. Ich war doch nicht immer nur das Gleiche. Entweder dein Obdach das Haus verteidigt oder es ist fake. Ja, das kann auch sein. Bei diesen Videos muss ich tatsächlich auch mehr sagen, dass ich das Gefühl oft hatte, es könnte fake sein. Hatte ich halt häufig das Gefühl gehabt, einfach, dass die Leute so ein bisschen rumfaken.